Greetings, friends, and welcome to the program. The What's Right show is on. Of course, we are on the go. So today's program, like Mondays and Tuesdays, will be a little shorter than the usual 2 hours that we have together. Also, this program is not airing on the radio, so you're just getting the podcast. Those of you who follow the podcast get this automatically. And those of you who are, well, I hope you know, I advertised it a little bit last week, but if you follow me on Twitter, on X, at What's Right Show, at What's Right Sam, the first account is for the program. The second is my personal X account. If you follow those, you'll find not only today's program, but also the video of today's program, which is an added benefit here of us doing this on the road. So a little more casual than our usual shows, but I'm kind of liking it. I'm enjoying this. And please give me your feedback either on X, shoot me a DM, or send me an email, sam@samandashlaw.com. All right, couple of things right now as we speak. A number of Trump transition officials, names in the cabinet, people that are, prominent in Trump world, apparently have been targeted by swatting attacks, bomb threats, etc. Minutes ago, Matt Gaetz reportedly had a bomb squad dispatched to his residence. So I hope everybody out there is staying safe. I hope these are just hoaxes, but even the hoaxes, of course, can be dangerous. And my only comment on this is we know now completely that they've lost, because this is the last resort, right? I mean, everything's failed. They've done it all. But apparently now they've got to call in these threats. They've got to make people's lives miserable. They've got to threaten, intimidate, and use violence to stop Trump's agenda. So, again, I think obviously hoping the authorities have this under control, and am certainly aware that this is, a big developing problem. There's a statement from the transition team saying that both last night and this morning, several of President Trump's cabinet nominees and administration appointees were targeted in violent, un-American threats to their lives and those who live with them. Attacks apparently ranged from bomb threats to swatting. So law enforcement, other authorities acted quickly to ensure the safety of those who were targeted. So, there it is. I'll tell you, there's another component, by the way, of what's going on in the transition world. And it's frustrating the left. And I think this is actually the bigger story. After what happened to Trump's first transition, when he trusted the FBI, he trusted the CIA and the intel communities and the Department of Justice to assist with the vetting of his nominees and also to provide the transition team with much needed information. What happened? Well, he got set up. And so this time around, the White House has a memorandum of understanding with the Biden administration that they will not accept support from the FBI and other federal agencies in and during the transition. So the memorandum of understanding, this is a formal document put together by the team, by the Trump team, makes a few things very clear. First, they're not going to use any taxpayer dollars. Okay, so they're fully independent off-grid. Okay. Second, the transition, and I'm going to quote from this, will not use government buildings or technology provided by the GSA. That's the Government Services Administration, kind of the general, call it, property manager of the United States government. And will, speaking of the transition team, operate as a quote unquote self-sufficient organization. This organizational autonomy means a streamlined process that guarantees the Trump administration is ready on day one. Now, I read this and I immediately think they assume correctly that if they meet in a government building, they will be surveilled. And the people surveilling them are the very enemy that was defeated here in the election. I don't mean Biden and Harris. I really mean the deep state, the administrative state that has a vested highly vested interest in Trump failing, perhaps not even getting to the presidency, and if he does, to be hindered and blocked and stopped, because his agenda is, of course, going to be very damaging to these people. So the transition team also in this memorandum says that they've already had all these existing, measures during the campaign, that they've, I assume, have employed some of the best security experts to assist them in maintaining system security. A few weeks back during the campaign, there were some reports that there's some hostile actors, perhaps the Iranians, had hacked into one of Trump's servers. You remember that this was, some news driving the cycle there at the end of the election, the end of the campaign. But nonetheless, there it is. So again, when we're talking about the campaign, the Trump-Vance campaign is not operating as business as usual with, in the way certainly that they behaved and acted, 8 years ago, and the way that other presidents have operated. And I think it's because they got burned. And all you do is you just have to ask General Flynn how that went for him 8 years ago when Trump, trusted the government, and the government, from, everyone, including, from Barack Obama to James Comey on down, were scheming in a way to get Trump and his team entrapped in some sort of scandal. That was the insurance policy that folks inside the DOJ were talking about. So I think this is all really good news, and it's nice to see that Trump is learning from his past mistakes. Absolutely. By the way, another update from earlier today: Jack Smith has made official the order from Judge Cannon's dismissal. Remember, Judge Cannon, she's the federal judge down there in South Florida who dismissed the documents case in its entirety against President Trump. So Jack Smith just dropped his appeal of that dismissal. Jack Smith was working on his way through the federal appellate courts to try to get Judge Cannon's dismissal of this case overturned. That now is moot. And one thing to be clear of, this is how low Jack Smith is. He is only dismissing the case, his appeal of the, he is only dropping his dismissal of the appeal. There we go. That's the better way of putting it, against Donald Trump. And he's going to proceed against the other appellees, the other defendants, co-defendants, one of which is Ralph Nader. You remember him. He was the valet at Mar-a-Lago, who was also, caught up in this, who they also went after. It was just despicable, the whole thing from top to bottom. No, none of these co-defendants are going to end up with anything. Trump will immediately issue pardons to them and end the case. It'll be over. So the thing is done. It's deader than dead. I just wanted to give you that particular update. So, look, I can't help it. I cannot believe that in spite of the fact that there is so much forward progress and Team Trump is certainly making great strides in bringing some peace and stability to the world and actively putting together an incredible administration, including Jay Bhattacharya, who is going to be the new Anthony Fauci, the new head of the NIH. And Bhattacharya, is absolutely a phenomenal pick, who has my strong endorsement. I'm just absolutely delighted that this guy will be put at the head of the NIH. So Trump gets a 2 thumbs up. Let me show you here because we're doing video. 1, 2, and I'll even do this. Bam. That's how stoked I am about this one. All right. So you got, now if you're listening to the audio, you're missing out on my hand gestures here. And you got to see the video. You got to go on X. You got What's Right Show. You got to follow the show, and you got to follow me. What's Right Sam? Very easy. What's Right Sam? One word on there. You'll find me. Easy peasy. So I'm stoked about this. But in spite of all the progress Trump is making, I cannot believe that in the midst of all of this, Kamala Harris, I don't know if you remember her. I'm here on this vacation. I've got some friends here from the Czech Republic, and they were kind of confused. Well, we were talking a lot about politics. I said, Kamala. And, they don't follow politics super closely, but I feel like everybody around the world who knows something about what's going on knew that we in the U.S. had an election, and everybody knows the name Trump. The point is, they didn't even know the name Kamala. I said, it's okay. We've forgotten her name too, but no, today, guess what, folks? We have been reminded that Kamala still exists, and not in a good way. Now, it's a 1-2 punch. I'm going to take you through it here step by step. The first Kamala Harris sighting is about a 10-minute video that she did from, I presume she's still on vacation on the Big Island in Hawaii. Now, I am at a beach. It's over there. Not in Hawaii, I'll tell you that. I'm not near Kamala Harris, not hanging out with her. But she's in Hawaii. She does this video. And I'm telling you, she is drunk when she's doing this video. It is so bad. In fact, don't take my word for it. I'm going to play. We did a little compilation, a little clip up. And I can't play all 10 minutes, but I've got 2 minutes here that I think you've just got to see because it's that bad. It is that bad.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Back at you, brother. You are such an extraordinary leader, and
I think she's talking to Tim Walz.
Lifelong friends. I just in front of everyone, I want to thank you, Tim. I'm thankful for the faith that you put in me and Governor Walz and our team, and I am thankful because I know your character is such that you're not gonna get knocked down, and you're in this fight. And the outcome of this election, obviously, is not what we wanted. It is not what we worked so hard for. You called friends. You called in favors. You said, hey, I showed up at your softball game. Now I need you to show up at the campaign office. Again, I'll say, the election didn't turn out like we wanted it to. Certainly not as we planned for it to.
Yeah.
But understand that the work we put into it was about empowering people. That's the spirit with the work we did. Our spirit and our work was about saying that it is a strength that we each have to lift people up. And I know that about you. It's why you're part of this call right now and all the work that you did over those 107 days and even before. That's your nature. It's leaders that we are dedicated to the coalition. That the strength of our country will be a function of our willingness to put in the work.
That was a hiccup.
And that we will do
that was literally a hiccup.
With a sense of joy, yes. With a sense of work ethic and understanding it's going to be hard, but it's good work. It's good work.
That's the worst thing ever. I mean, I don't know how it's possible that her team let her do this. The only explanation I have for why, and understand, look, this was a staged video. She had the American flag put up. I mean, I've stayed in some nice places around the world, hotels, nice hotels, houses, rental houses, whatever. They don't come with giant American flags typically, okay? That's something that her team brought in, put in as a prop, set up a little studio, did their thing. So the point is, there were multiple people involved in producing this video. And for what purpose? Because you always have to ask the why. And I'm convinced, Robbie, we haven't talked about this. I think it's to sabotage her. I think that she got on a call with donors a few days ago. We talked about this. Got on a phone call with donors and said, oh, what do you guys think about me in 28? What do you think about Kamala Harris 2028? And people on that call, I guarantee you, people on that call all said nice things publicly. Because for the most part, Democrats have a problem being honest. Okay. So they all said nice things like, oh, Kamala, Madam Vice President, that's a great idea. I think we are behind you. And then behind the scenes got together and said, oh, no. We gotta make sure that this woman never sees the day of light again politically because she's terrible. And that's what I think. I think that what we're seeing right now and from this point forward is going to be sabotage. Now, I would say this, we conservatives are very good at one thing. We're good at a lot of things, but we are excellent in the world of political humor and of satire because we're not constantly worried about offending people. And at the end of the day, humor does rely on a certain amount of emotional resiliency, which is something we bring to the table. So very quickly, and I did not create this, but a conservative meme master came up with this spoof on Kamala Harris's video. And again, if you're listening just to the audio version of this, I'm not going to describe what it is, what this person has done to it, but it is freaking hilarious.
Don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did.
Robbie, I'm dead. Okay. So what we say, this is must-see audio. Okay. Again, you can find this all on Twitter. Wait. No, she couldn't have. Robbie here's asking me, how could Kamala Harris have possibly run the country? No, she couldn't have. And by the way, I'll give you a more serious answer to that. And that is, when you look at what her team was like, see, there was this podcast it's called Pod Save America. It's a liberal podcast, and it's making some news. It dropped yesterday, and I finally today, instead of enjoying that beautiful beach over there, I did. I was on the beach, but I put my headphones in, and I listened to this absolutely insufferable hour and 40 minutes of these idiots who ran Kamala Harris's campaign. And so, Robbie, there's no way she could have run the country. And it's not just because she sounds, best case scenario, sounds like she's drunk. Worst case scenario, she's actually drunk, and most certainly is also an idiot. The people that surrounded her just aren't serious people. They're not achievers in any way. And that was my big takeaway from it. So I want to do a quick break and come back, if I may, and go through this Pod Save America. There's a couple moments in particular that I want to share with you. And they're bad. I mean, they're really bad. And they're bad because this campaign started with, right, when Harris was swapped in to replace Biden, the campaign at that moment started with the disadvantage of a candidate who did not think on her feet. And I said this more than once here in the last, 120 days. I said, you can have a candidate perhaps that isn't quick on their feet, but then they have to have staff and a team that is next level. Like, you need to have people that give her a script and say, you stick to this script. And as long as the candidate has some amount of discipline, everything's good. Well, disavow yourselves all, and I'll get to this here, of the thought that it was all Kamala that messed this up, that it was all her fault. The team that she selected, and that's on her, were abysmal. So we'll get to that when we come back. Sam Rajovsky, the What's Right Show on the go, brought to you by Sam and Ash, Injury Law, 702-820-1234, because you deserve what's right.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam and Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
Hi, welcome back. Sam Rajovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. That's where you catch me on the radio, Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. Here we're doing a quick show on the go. So the What's Right show, abbreviated format from the road, taking a little bit of time away from my vacation every day to give you all an update on what's going on. So we were just talking here before the break about the Pod Save America podcast. And this thing was dropped yesterday. The host, Dan Pfeiffer, he's a former senior political advisor to Barack Obama. And he had on as guests Jen O'Malley Dillon, who was the Harris campaign chair. You're familiar with her. You've seen her speak on behalf of the campaign. David Plouffe, who was a senior Harris campaign advisor, also former Obama campaign manager. Stephanie Cutter, senior advisor for, strategy marketing or strategy messaging, Quentin Fulks, a name I'm not that familiar with, principal deputy Harris campaign manager. So these are kind of top echelon people. Notably missing, by the way, is the campaign manager herself for the whole campaign. But regardless, these are not underlings. These are top level people that have come forward to have a discussion. Now, Jen O'Malley Dillon, who's one of the principal architects of the campaign, does a lot of talking in this podcast. And the thing goes on for like an hour and 40 minutes, but there's one particular moment where she gives, excuses for why Kamala Harris didn't do these interviews. And if you remember, Biden dropped out and endorsed Harris on July 21st. And Harris's first interview was with Dana Bash on August 29th. Now, in a campaign that's already only 100 days or so, 3 months or so to close, the deal with the American public and win, they talk a lot about this on the podcast, by the way. They lament that they didn't have enough time. And the whole time, every time they said this, Robbie, I'm giggling because I think to myself, if the more time they would have with Kamala Harris, in other words, giving Kamala Harris airtime was counterproductive. The more the American public heard from Kamala Harris, the less they liked her, right? So that's kind of right. So, and that absolutely bears out, by the way, in the data. But here, Dan Pfeiffer talking to Jen O'Malley Dillon. Jen O'Malley Dillon makes all these excuses, right, for why they didn't bring her out for interviews, right? Well, listen.
I mean, look, I am not media hater by any measure. And I think that, we women don't get far in life talking about double standards. So that's not the point. But I do think a narrative, 107 days, 2 weeks because of a hurricane, 2 weeks talking about how she didn't do interviews, which, she was doing plenty, but we were doing in our own way. We had to, be the nominee, had to find a running mate and do a rollout. I mean, there was all these things that you kind of want to factor in, but real people heard in some way that we were not going to have interviews, which was both not true and also so counter to any kind of standard that was put on Trump that I think that was a problem. And then on top of that, we would do an interview. And to Stephanie's point, the questions were small and processy and about
dumb.
They were not informing a voter who was trying to listen to learn more or to understand. And I'm not here to say that the whole system was focused on us incorrectly. I'm just saying, again, of the things we need to explore as we move forward as a campaign and as a country, that does a disservice to voters. And, I think back and think we should have signaled more of our strategy early on about podcasts and who we were trying to reach. And But we had a limited amount of time to reach the people we're trying to reach, and we were trying to go to them. But being up against a narrative that we weren't doing anything, or we were afraid to have interviews, is completely and also like took hold a little bit. And we just gave us another thing we had to fight back for that Trump never had to worry about.
Well, this is so absurd. Trump was talking to any media outlet basically that he could lay his mouth on. All right. The guy has never had a problem going and talking to media. And, you know, he turned down 60 Minutes, which was the right decision to make because they chop everything up and are, you know, would have damaged him. But Trump was doing, I mean, you look at just the statistics, the number of interviews, volume of cumulative interview minutes, Trump versus Kamala Harris. It's just staggering. Don't quote me on this, Robbie. I think it's like 50-1. So it was orders of magnitude more media across the board that Trump was willing to do than Kamala Harris. And what, you know, Jen O'Malley Dillon here is lying about, and she's flat out lying about it, is that it was a strategy of the campaign in the beginning to keep her offline. And there were people in the upper echelons of the campaign who went on the record telling reporters that they intended to have a joy campaign, a vibes campaign, and not one where we're going to get mired into the issues. They were going to put Kamala out there as some sort of a cheerleader for America and for feeling good and you know, and let Trump get bogged down in talking about policy that they thought would be over the American public's heads. The entire problem here, put simply, was every one of those people that's sitting around this table, this podcast table, thinks the American public is dumb. Okay, is dumb. They think we're all retarded. All right. I hate to say it this way, but that's what they think. It is so profoundly condescending. And I say this because that's the only explanation for their strategy. And it turned out that quite the opposite was true. For example, when we get into the Joe Rogan interview, look at the millions of people who actually went and watched 3 hours of in-depth conversation with Donald Trump. It turns out that people were starving for substance. And because you had that, what we'll call it 45-day lag from, you know, the beginning of Kamala Harris getting tagged into the campaign to actually sitting down with Dana Bash, you know, losing basically half of her campaign period not saying anything. Then once she began talking, she was already behind. And because she's dumb and because she's not a very good speaker, okay, and gives organized talk, all the stuff that we know about her, the more she talked, the worse it got. And the campaign knew this. They knew this was her weakness. And so all of this idea that that this was just somehow a whoopsie daisy and it's unfair or whatever is nonsense. Now, another interesting part. And by the way, Robbie, exactly. The questions, by the way, these are questions that they would give the reporters. The questions, okay, that were being asked of Kamala Harris in these interviews were pre-screened by the campaign. And now you have the people that actually were writing the questions, giving them to CNN, giving them to MSNBC, giving them to Al Sharpton, giving them to all of these fake money interviews that she was giving, are sitting here. They've got the audacity to sit here 2 weeks, 3 weeks after they lost a race, horribly lost a race. And they're not even admitting the fact that they're the ones that they're blaming the reporters. By the way, I'm glad you brought this up, Robbie, because I'm thinking if I'm a reporter that bent over backwards, that took whatever last little little shreds of credibility that I have as a hack reporter for MSNBC, and was like, okay, give me the questions you want me to ask the vice president. I'll do it. Oh, we got to stop Trump. He's Hitler. And I dutifully do it as a good Democrat in the media. I do my service, to stop the orange man. And then 3 weeks later, this witch, Jed O'Malley Dillon, who orchestrated it, is throwing me, the reporter, under the bus. This is what I'm thinking about how this must feel. And I bet you there are reporters across America who did this, who helped her, who took their questions, who sacrificed whatever remaining journalistic credibility they had. And as a cherry on top, they are going, my gosh, we screwed up. We didn't ask her good enough questions, God. Wow. So Robbie, absolutely a great point. By the way, continued. Yeah. Well, no, and she didn't. Yeah. She never answered the questions. Of course, we know that. But they're complaining not about her answers. They're complaining about the questions. And so the funny thing to me is that the questions were all planted. Okay. So Dan Pfeiffer, the host, then is talking, asks David Plouffe, on this about internal analytics. Now, we here on the program throughout the campaign, I would always try to talk a little bit about the polls, because the polls are in and of themselves interesting. And I said interesting. They're not accurate. And a number of you during the course of the campaign would email me, would text me, would write on Twitter, Sam, I don't share your optimism for the trajectory of the race. These polls all show things very close. And I kept telling you that these polls were wrong. And I also spoke about the internal polling that showed Trump ahead. Now, here's David Plouffe, who's a former campaign manager for Barack Obama. He's, a Democratic Party campaign veteran, you could call him. And he was a senior advisor here to the Harris campaign. Here's his take on an admission. It's an admission on the internal polling that the Harris campaign was doing.
When we got in, my recollection is some of that snapped back, but we were behind. I mean, I think it surprised people because there was these public polls that came out in late September, early October, showing us with leads that we never saw. It was just basically a race that in the battlegrounds was 46-47, 47-48. So that's not where we started. We started behind. She was able to climb out. I think even after the debate, we might have gained, 0.51. It wasn't a race that moved a lot. And so I think when you think about our own internal analytics, if you have Wisconsin at 47-47, or Pennsylvania 48-47 Trump, let's say, which I think is where we had it at the end, you've got to have undecided break your way more than your opponents, and you've got to get a little benefit from turnout, which we weren't able to do.
What's hilarious is, they're describing that their internal polling had Trump consistently ahead by a point or two. If you go back to Rasmussen, because the discussion of polls, what matters is, and somehow the mainstream media never does this. They never look at the polls and they go, okay, well, who did well 4 years ago? Who did well 8 years ago? Who did well on the midterms? Who got it right? And I want you all to remember right now, if you go back to Rasmussen, and I use Rasmussen consistently throughout the campaign. I told you that Rasmussen was reliable. If you go back, the spread, the national spread, okay, for Trump was consistently positive. You go back from starting, you go back starting to February, and for, take, Biden toward the end of Biden's, of Biden being in the race, Trump was up a lot. And Trump's lead dropped a little bit when Kamala got in. But there was never this enormous bounce that everybody was talking about and were putting in the polls. In fact, you had a lot of insane polling. And I'm not just talking about Ann Seltzer and that nonsense. But there was some objectively terrible polling. And as it turns out, the campaign itself knew how bad the polling was. So that's just it. Now, the next point here that they covered, they got specifically into the Joe Rogan fiasco and the arguments about why they, should have, couldn't have, didn't want to have done the podcast, having her, Kamala Harris go on Rogan, even though she had an invite. And I'm having trouble even saying this. The answer that they give here is so insane to me. It's just such an obvious lie. This is Stephanie Cutter, okay, senior advisor for strategy messaging. This woman is in charge of the candidate, talking to the media and, messaging whatever the ideology of the campaign is. Okay. This is the woman in charge of it. And listen to the reason she has for them not being able to go on Rogan.
We wanted to do it. I hate to repeat this over and over, but it was a very short race with a limited number of days. And for a candidate to leave the battleground to go to Houston, which is a day off the playing field in the battleground, getting that timing right is really important. So we had discussions with Joe Rogan's team. They were great. They wanted us to come on. We wanted to come on. We tried to get a date to make it work. And ultimately, we just weren't able to find a date.
Oh, but guess what? She goes to Houston. And they get into this, by the way, it's a longer clip. I don't want to bore you with this. She ends up going to Houston. And so one thing that Stephanie says here is she goes, well, and we ended up going to Houston and we had a really nice speech. And I'm on folks, I'm on vacation. I'm just kind of got half my brain here turned off, drinking adult beverages on the beach, although not at the same clip as apparently Kamala is. At any rate, I'm listening to this and I immediately took my headphones off and I went and I played it for my family. I went, listen to this. She is saying, we had discussions. We tried to make it work. It was a scheduling thing, but we ended up doing a speech in Houston and we talked to some people. And I'm like, whoa, you let your candidate, you used your candidate's time to do a speech to what? Best case scenario, 5,000 people. Joe Rogan has a worldwide following of 3 billion with a B. How many Americans, Robbie? I don't know what the latest is on the Trump interview, because it was Trump that sat down with Rogan and then also Vance. Vance went on for, 4 hours. Tens of millions of people listened to it. Listen to a lot. And how many voters went in and said, wow, that was really humanizing to Trump. And they weren't even focused about, what Trump was saying. They just listened to him talk and found out he was a normal guy. And, it could have really helped her. And I tend to believe, for what it's worth, I tend to believe that Kamala Harris would have gone on there and made a clown of herself. But it's not, I can't tell you definitively that would have been the case because Joe Rogan wouldn't have tried to humiliate her. He would have asked her tough questions, but she could have pivoted to personal answers and she could have humanized herself potentially, right? So whoever it was, whatever team of people said no Rogan, they either believe in their heart of hearts that Kamala Harris is the worst, the worst candidate in the history of the Democratic Party to ever run. Or they're absolute media idiots. And my favorite response to this came from James Carville on this because, and I'll play this clip because we're going to have to bleep out some of Carville's language here, but I think you'll get the gist that Carville is less than pleased with today's Democratic Party, and particularly campaigns and how they're run.
The vice president was thinking about going on Joe Rogan's show, and a lot of the younger progressive staffers pitched a hissy fit. Supposedly the campaign said that wasn't the term de facto, but they did. When you put a campaign together and you hire young people to do work, let me tell you exactly what you tell these people, what I would tell them. Not only am I not interested in your opinion, I'm not even going to call you by your name. You're 23 years old. I don't really give a what you think. And let me tell you another huge error this way, is when people said campaigns need to reflect progressive values. No, they don't. No, they don't. Campaigns are authoritarian by their nature. And if I were running a 2028 campaign and I had some little snot-nosed 23-year-old saying, I'm going to resign if you don't do this, not only would I fire that on the spot, I would find out who hired them and fire that person on the spot. I'm really not interested in your uninformed, stupid opinion as to whether you go on Joe Rogan or not.
So, the best part of all of this is that the failure of the Kamala Harris campaign, in my book, is far bigger than just a bad candidate. The failure of the Kamala Harris campaign, I think Carville really gets to it here, is that liberalism, Democrat leftism today, circa 2024, is so absurdly unworkable, right? DEI, whatever business it has been injected into, is doing worse today than it did before that ideology showed up. This idea of progressive values and listening to all the stakeholders and having, as Carville puts it, young, snot-nosed kids who don't know anything dictate to their elders what should happen. This nonsense that we're constantly being told by the Democratic Party is the way the world ought to work. Guess what? It doesn't work. It's a failure everywhere it's tried. And Carville literally says that for Democrats to win elections, they will have to become conservatives. Not just on messaging, not just on policy, but also in the way that they run the back office. So I need you all to understand what an incredible victory the election was. And in spite of whatever setbacks have happened and races maybe that haven't turned out, and a long way to go on election integrity, which I want to get to here. We'll get into Joe Lombardo talking about it here in Nevada because it's an important issue, cleaning up our elections. Absolutely. But the victory earlier this month was spectacular. And I think we need to savor it. And I think just because the losers of the round table getting together on Pod Save America talking about the campaign, doing a quote-unquote post-mortem, can't come to grips with reality doesn't mean that the reality isn't out there and that people aren't realizing it. And James Carville here, I think, really underscores that. So, friends, tomorrow's Thanksgiving. I'll do a quick Thanksgiving message tomorrow. But in the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. And I will see you again in a day. Sam Rajovsky, the What's Right Show on the go, brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. My email, sam@samandashLaw.com. Please tell a friend about what we're doing. Go on Twitter, go on X, @What's Right Show, @What's Right Sam. We'll see you there.